Welcome to Goobertown Hobbies. My name is Brent. Today, we are testing out speed paint from the Army Painter. This line is a strong competitor to contrast paints from Games Workshop, and they're a whole bunch of fun. I've got all 23 colors, I've got 85 test models, and I'm ready to give my review. Full disclosure, Army Painter sent this to me as review stock ahead of release. I'm under no obligations, but I did receive this for free. There's Army Painter stuff that I like, Army Painter stuff that I don't like, and some stuff that I'm pretty neutral about. Spoiler alert, I'm making this video because I'm excited about this product. People are gonna find a lot of great ways to use these, but we'll start with a recommended use. You chuck some of this on a model with a light colored base coat, and the speed paint pretty much does the rest. It covers everything and leaves a gradient from the high points down to the deep recesses. The idea is that you're getting color, shading, and highlighting all in one step. The first thing I wanted to do was check out all the colors. I printed and primed a whole lot of test models. These skirmishers are 3D prints from Titan Forge. I primed them with a few thin coats of Army Painter matte white spray paint. I'm putting the speed paint on with a big brush and letting it run wherever it wants to go. I used my brush to soak up the truly massive pools of liquid, but other than that, there's really not much skill involved here. Putting this down as a wash over Army Painter White is how these speed paints are intended to be used. Quick tip, you don't need to use Army Painter White spray paint. I checked. These models were primed with Stynylrez white primer and then either given a coat of matte varnish or gloss varnish. Both matte and gloss undercoats worked perfectly fine on these models. I thought the gloss models might end up with white spots where the speed paint wouldn't stick, but that didn't happen at all. If anything, the slippery gloss coat ended up with better contrast. More of the wash was able to slide down into the recesses, and still, all of the high points had some coverage. So yep, Army Painter spray paint will work as an undercoat, but you don't need to limit yourself to that. I'm also testing every color on top of bright metallic silver. These models are 3D prints of the Morzal Deathlord from Titan Forge. I didn't print out his arms, but I think you get the idea with his head, chest, legs, and big ol' pauldrons. The silver is from the Vallejo metal color range. I do have some Army Painter metallics around here, but the Vallejo metal color is better. I'm telling ya, this is gonna be a fair review. This speed paint over metallics looks really great when it's wet. Let's see how it dries. So yeah, I pointed my camera at these models while they were drying. It sounds stupid, but I actually learned a lot. I'm speeding up the footage here. It takes about 20 minutes for most of the model to dry, but the deepest pockets hold out for close to an hour. It's interesting that after you stop touching it with a brush, the wash pretty much stays where you put it. Also interesting is what happens to the big pools of liquid. Ordinarily, big pools of wash are something that I try to avoid. Sometimes they can dry into strange and ugly patterns. In this case though, the worst thing that happens is that the deepest pools become completely opaque. I'm really seeing it there for the thigh armor on the Deathlord. Those completely opaque patches are the worst part of the paint job, but they really aren't bad at all. The conclusion is that I like the way this stuff dries. It's much more matte when it dries, and I think it looks good. For the silver, there's still just enough metallic shining through. Alrighty, so now we've got 23 colors over white and 23 colors over silver. Don't worry, we've got more test models where those come from. Behind the scenes, I've been trying out some water washable resin that esun sent to me. And so far, yep, it prints well. It's convenient to clean this whole pile of printed minis with water instead of alcohol. A lot of the folks watching this video aren't interested in 3D printing, but it sure is useful to make a pile of test minis. For this video, I chose some figures from my electronic collection that had a variety of interesting textures. So this looks like a lot of minis, but 23 colors is a relatively small number compared to other paint lines. Games Workshop contrast paints have 34 colors. Army Painter's own War Paints line has 96 colors. So, is 23 enough? Do we have all the colors that we need? I found that I could take 12 of the most vibrant colors and arrange them on a color wheel. This color wheel looks pretty good. Roy G. Biv is all there, and so are some nice intermediate hues. The remaining 11 paints are neutral colors like black, white, gray, brown, and tan. There are also some muted shades of green and blue that I included in this group. Realistically, we're probably going to get more use out of these neutral colors than we are out of the bright, vibrant colors. So yeah, I think the balance of this set is quite good. 12 paints that I'd describe as fun and vibrant, and 11 that are more like useful everyday workhorses. If you stay tuned, at the end of this review, I'll spend 23 seconds giving you high-resolution color swatches so that you can decide on individual colors you might be interested in. Alrighty. In addition to being a hobby goober here on YouTube, I'm also a chemist. I can tell you that paint pigments are not created equal. Different pigments within a single paint range can have wildly different molecular structures. From a practical standpoint, this means that some pigments are stronger than others and some are weaker. Some are easier to mix into paints and some are harder. Army Painter has attempted to make a paint line with consistent coverage, and this is not an easy task. Contrast paint has a reputation for having some colors that cover really well and some that don't. Long before contrast paints, I used secret weapon washes, and that was the same story. Each color acted a bit differently. Back to Speedpaint. Some colors are clearly supposed to have light coverage. Runic Gray in particular has the coverage of a more traditional wash. But that's what it's supposed to do, and it looks good. Grim Black is supposed to have high coverage, and it does. Most of the other colors are supposed to be consistent with each other in terms of their strength. When I was using it, Hive Purple felt a bit too strong, and Plasmatic Bolt felt a bit too weak. The rest of the colors are somewhere in between. And honestly, the difference between Hive Purple and Plasmatic Bolt isn't bad. I'm gonna say mission accomplished on this one. This is a paint line where most of the colors have similar strength and coverage. Even the yellow is decently strong. If you do think that one of the colors is too weak, something you can do is apply multiple coats. This is what 1, 2, or 3 layers of Malignant Green look like. And here's 1, 2, and 3 layers of Runic Gray. I felt like there was some risk of reactivating and washing off the previous layer, so I gave each coat a good 8 hours to dry. I also didn't want to push my luck, so I worked as fast as I could for the second and third coats. Now if you want to go for a lighter coat, these speed paints can be thinned with a bit of the speed paint medium. By counting up drops, I mixed a blend that was 50% speed paint and 50% medium, and another one that was 25% speed paint and 75% medium. Here's Hive Purple at full strength, 1:1, and 1:3 dilution. I think it looks good with a bit of dilution. And here's Cloudburst Blue at full strength, 1:1, and 1:3 dilution. So yeah, if you don't like the strength of these speed paints, you have some options for making them lighter or making them darker. This medium seems like useful stuff. I've got a feeling there are gonna be some amateur alchemists out there who try mixing this medium with ink and paint and who knows what all else. As far as I know, speed paint medium is only being sold in this dinky little bottle. The price per volume is gonna be quite high as far as paint medium goes. My suggestion is to only use this stuff when you want to dilute speed paint. If you have a hankering to do some wild experimentation with paint medium, just get yourself a big bottle of Liquitex. One last note on pigment strengths. Most of the speed paints are translucent. The liquids are colored, but clear. But check out Orc Skin. The liquid is cloudy. My guess is that the development team needed to mix an opaque pigment like titanium white into this blend to give Orc Skin the coverage it needed. In use, Orc Skin works just fine, but I just thought it was an interesting reminder that pigments are not created equal. It's honestly an achievement that this line of paints is reasonably consistent in terms of coverage and color intensity. Very quick, let's talk about airbrushing. Not everyone has an airbrush, but this is fun to watch either way. Unthinned speed paint goes through an airbrush just fine. If you have a light touch with your trigger finger, you can use this to color tint your models. I didn't spend much time with this, but I suspect that some folks are really gonna make good use out of speed paints through the airbrush. Just for fun, I tried blasting speed paint onto the model as fast as I could, and it turned out awesome. I got little pools of liquid all over the model that act just like I had put them on with a brush. I don't know if anyone will ever find a good use for speed blasting speed paint, but it sure is fun. One last thing you can do with an airbrush is Xenothil prime your models. This is a black undercoat with white sprayed on from above. When we put the speed paints on over these models, we're gonna get some really cool looks. We're getting even more transitions from light to dark. Those shadows are moody and awesome. The Xenothil Undercoat can be done with spray paint too. Prime the model black and give a squirt of white from above. The transitions normally aren't quite as smooth, but it'll still give a cool look. Alternatively, you can prime your models black and then use a dry brush of white paint to make a similar looking undercoat. We can use this to simulate the model being lit from above and having some deep shadows. Speed paint over this looks great. It's different from the white undercoat and even a bit different from the Xenothil primed models. Black primer, white dry brush, and then colored with speed paint. This could be a good way to paint pieces for a board game. Alright, we've done a lot of testing of these speed paints so far, but I haven't actually tried to paint a model with them. I'm trading in my big brush for a smaller one, and I'm gonna try to paint a few of these models. In some ways, this is faster and easier than painting with ordinary paints, but in some ways, it's more difficult. It's important that I don't mess up the white undercoat for the colors that I'm gonna put down in later steps. I've got to color inside the lines, especially in the first steps. I've got to put speed paint where I want it and try not to put it anywhere else. If we do mess up, we can either just keep going and see what happens, or we can load up a brush with white paint and redo part of the primer layer. But I'm really trying to avoid that if I can. I'm going to do my best to avoid having to touch up the primer. And here's something else that's a bit tricky with these speed paints. It's hard to guess what the paint will look like before you put it on a model. For standard paints, the liquid is roughly the same color as a dry coat of paint. For the speed paints though, you really need to test them to understand what all the different colors will do. Sometimes the color printed on the bottle helps, and sometimes it doesn't. As an example, Sand Golem turned out to be one of my favorite colors, but it looks nothing like the bottle and nothing like the liquid. If I were buying individual colors at the store, this probably would have been one of my last picks, and that would have been a mistake. Sand Golem is great, but you'd never guess it from looking at the bottle. So there's a learning curve to working with these speed paints, but they are fun and they are faster than painting, shading, and highlighting. Some of my models are turning out a bit wonky, but some of them are actually pretty dang good. I'll keep on practicing. Now let's talk price. When Games Workshop contrast paints came out, my verdict was that they were fun, but way overpriced. If you buy the complete set of contrast paints, it comes out to $7.80 per color. If you buy the complete set of speed paints, it comes out to $4.30 per color. Plus, Army Painter throws in a brush and a bottle of medium. $4.30 is much less than $7.80, 55% of the price. So these speed paints are more expensive than Army Painter's main line of war paints, but they are much cheaper than the competition from Games Workshop. This set of 23 speed paints plus the bottle of medium and a brush costs $99 US. That is still a lot of money. This is not a cheap set of paints. But it doesn't make me angry the way that the price tag on Games Workshop contrast paints does. And again, I was sent this set for free, so you should look at the price and make your own judgment call. Something else to consider, speed paints come in better bottles than contrast paints. Paints last longer in dropper bottles. You aren't likely to spill them. There isn't going to be backwash of dirty paint water into a dropper bottle. It's easy to put these paints onto a palette for mixing, and it's easy to count drops to standardize mixing ratio. Also, these speed paints each come preloaded with a couple of steel mixing balls, and that's nice. I know that there are some people out there who make excuses for Games Workshop paint pots, but those people are wrong. So speed paints are much cheaper than contrast paints, and they come in much better bottles. As for performance, speed paints are on par with contrast paints, and maybe slightly better. I'll refer you to Dana Howl's channel. Dana has been doing some side-to-side comparisons between contrast paints and speed paints. Overall, I think this line of paints is going to have broad appeal. I think it's totally viable to give these to a beginner and tell them to have fun. Also, these days Army Painter has a wide reach. Where I live, I can find Army Painter in as many stores as I can find Games Workshop paints, and it's much easier to find Army Painter locally than it is to find Vallejo. So yeah, new hobby products come out every day, but I chose to spend time checking out these speed paints because I think they're going to be important in our hobby. They'll be worth knowing about, even if you aren't going to be using them or aren't going to be using them on a regular basis. I just scratched the surface in this video, but I'm sure that people are going to be using these for tints and glazes and making all kinds of beautiful art. I'm going to close the video by showing the 23 color swatches, so get ready to hit pause if something nice flies across the screen. That's it for this time. Thank you all so much for watching.